people didn't have in the 70s and 80s, didn't actually have gyms, did they? And they didn't need to go to, or didn't need to go to, but there weren't gyms available for people to go to. What do you think changed? You know, what was the genesis of the kind of the fitness industry as we know it today, really? Because many of our listeners, and some of them won't have even been born in 1990, wouldn't ever be able to imagine a time without gyms and without health clubs that we have today.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I remember my local leisure centre having a multi-gym at the back of the badminton courts that we all used, and then all of a sudden, a month later, they built a gym within the facility, and then they were asking people to pay money on top of like it was a facility within a facility, like a separate facility. I clearly remember that. I don't honestly know, James. It's a really great question. Perhaps people saw an opportunity. Perhaps people had more leisure time. Perhaps people were getting more educated in terms of, the importance of health in terms of longevity and better quality of movement. But no, I really think that's a great question. And do you know what? I'm going to actually investigate that.
I think there was go on, Paul. Yeah, we've had a lot of guests, and when you look at like people like Mark Rifkin, Dan John, some of those people in their 50s and 60s that we've had on in the past, and we see them as quite big kind of characters within the current fitness industry. But really, when you look back, prior to the 90s and 80s and even the 1980s, it was kind of a niche thing to be really into training. There were obviously people who threw themselves into it head first and became very, very high level. And they often had a sporting background. So, Mark Rifkin had a sporting background. Dan John had a sporting background. Phil Maffetone, they all had sporting backgrounds. And I mean, we take the Sunday run and the kind of jogging phenomenon that's been kind of building momentum over the last 20, 30 years as something as a given. But in the 70s, we didn't even have the Nike shoe. And it wasn't until we had the Nike shoe, and there was a couple of popular authors who wrote about jogging, and women didn't even enter like marathons back in the 60s. So this is all quite modern, isn't it? This kind of whole health pursuit. But on the other side of the coin is, we've got an obesity epidemic. So that's where
I was going to go. Do you think like through the 80s, that's when everything became like, there was more office jobs came around and stuff like that. So people start to sit down more, and then like you start to get fast food and delivery and like bigger supermarkets again, like hypermarkets and all that sort of stuff. And you know what I mean? So like the food industry was going that way. People were going to the butcher's less and going to the fruit shop less. We used to go to the butcher's, the fruit shop, and all that sort of stuff, like different shops. Booklesses, my mum used to go to, to get the fruit and veg and all that sort of stuff. And then that all changed and people started sitting down more. Stuart McGill was talking about this. People started sitting down more, and then that's when you started to get like sort of more problems. And then people, this is in my head. I don't know if this is true or not, but this is just my kind of perception of it, is people then started to think, well, I need to do some formal exercise rather than getting exercise through the job or, or whatever.
No, I totally agree. And I think all of you bring up some very good points. It's like most things in life, there's not one thing that led to something happening. There's a series of factors that led to something happening, and the fact that we may have been moving towards, that may have been the start of moving towards more office jobs, and maybe the start of what is now the digital age. And, has been brought up. Joan Benoit won the first Olympic women's marathon in 84, I do believe, which was a tragedy that they were kept out of, or females were kept out of certain events for such a long time. And even today, it's a real shame that perhaps women's sport still doesn't get the same publicity that it does on TV and radio that it deserves. So, I think there's a number of factors that led to the fitness industry sort of growing as it has done.